Thanks for joining me for another study in the book of Proverbs. We're going to be in Proverbs 19 today. I'm so glad we're going to be able to go through Proverbs. It seemed like when I was a younger person, I just craved Proverbs. I read through it over and over. I yearned to be wiser. And then there seemed to be a time where I neglected it and pursued other things. And I'm glad I get to come back now and look at Proverbs again. And oftentimes you look and you're reading and you go, wow, I forgot that was even there. Has that ever happened to you? Or you're looking at a passage and it looks different this time. That happens when we read the Bible. Often you read it and you go, wow, I'm getting a little bit different meaning this time. It's not because the Word of God changes, it's because we change. And over the years, I'm sure I've changed. And so going through this again has been very beneficial for me. I hope it's been good for you as well. Well, we're going to be in chapter 19, and it's rather lengthy, so we're not going to be able to elaborate too much on these passages, but I hope we get an insight into some of these words of wisdom from Solomon. Chapter 19, verse 1. Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than he who is perverse in speech and is a fool. You know, even if you're poor, if you ever become poor, at least you can have integrity. It doesn't take a whole lot of money to be honest. It doesn't take a lot of money to be clean. It doesn't take a lot of money to have good speech. No matter where you're at, you need to have integrity. And one of the things it does here is that tells us that being poor is not the same as being a fool. Sometimes we make that mistake. And yet he says, though, what's really important is your speech. You can still be a fool and perverse in speech, even if you have money. And if you're poor, it's something that's better than having money, and that is having integrity, he says. Verse 2, also, if it is not good for a person to be without knowledge, and he who hurries, his footsteps errs. Well, and add to this, it's good to have knowledge. It's good for a poor man to have knowledge. It's good for us all to have knowledge. It's good for everyone to have knowledge, integrity, and wisdom. And then he says, the guy who hurries his footsteps. You know, one of the problems that people have is that they're just in a big hurry. They're in a big hurry to learn wisdom. They're in a big hurry to get an education. And they're rushing back and forth. And one of the easiest ways to gain knowledge is really simple. It is to just sit down and start studying. And the guy who hurries, he doesn't even slow down to learn knowledge. And so there's where he errs. Verse 3. The foolishness of man ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord. You know, the foolish man, his ways, he just ruins his own life. You're just bringing it on yourself. You ever heard that statement? You're just causing your own problems. And this is what happens with this foolish man. He ruins his own ways, but then he blames it on God. It's not fair. Why is God doing this to me? Well, because you are suffering the consequences of your stupidity, of your foolishness. And so that's what he's just saying here. The foolishness of man ruins his way. You're only causing your own problems. We treat God as if he had fallen off a turnip truck and doesn't know what he's talking about. And then when we find ourselves in trouble, we again start to blame God. We need to honor God and recognize that his ways are righteous ways. Verse 4, wealth adds many friends, but a poor man is separated from his friend. Well, Proverbs is practical. This might not be right to do this, but that's the way it is in life. The guy who has money has friends oftentimes. I don't know what kind of friends they are. We might say they're fair weather friends, but he has friends. One of the things you read about people who have won the lottery, they'll say, man, the friends and relatives just came out of the woodwork. Some of them years later been interviewed and they said, I wish we never have won anything because we had just been bothered endlessly by our friends and our relatives for help. And so there's a truism here. Wealth adds many friends, but a poor man is separated from his friends. It's what kind of friends you want. 5, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will not escape. Sometimes it seems like that's what happens, is that the liar goes unpunished. He does escape, whether it's in politics or whether it's just in those who are friends around you. But Solomon just says that there is not going to be an ultimate escape. If you are going to be a liar, you have to have a really good memory. And no one's memory is that good. And so you find yourself tripped up somewhere along the line. And you will not escape, is what he says. It's going to catch up with you eventually. Verse 6, many will seek the favor of a generous man, and every man is a friend to him who gives gifts. Well, that seems to go back to verse 4, doesn't it? Guy who gives gifts, he's got a lot of friends. Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres have a lot of friends. They give away a lot of stuff. And people love them because of that. But if they're poor and they're not giving away much gifts, I don't know what would attract us to them as much. And so that's what he's saying here, is that many will seek the favor of a generous man, and every man is a friend to him who gives gifts. Verse 7, all the brothers of a poor man hate him. How much more do his friends abandon him? He pursues them with words, but they are gone. Again, this is not right, but it's just the way it is oftentimes. The poor person doesn't have friends. But one thing that you could say for the poor, the friends he has are true friends, are good friends, are real friends. Verse 8, he who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. It's a blessing to have wisdom. And, we often say, you're just hurting yourself. Whether, I remember in school when I was in high school, and there would always be the slackers during the PE part of our day. And someone would always say to them, you're just hurting yourself. You're just not going to be in condition. You're not going to be in the shape to play the sports that we're doing. And it seems like he's saying here, though, the guy who gets wisdom, he's the guy who gets it. He loves his own soul. He realizes this is a blessing, a benefit for him. And he who keeps understanding will find good. Verse 9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who tells lies will perish. Again, that seems to go back to verse 5. There's these themes that keep repeating themselves. A liar, he's not going to get away with it. It's a sin to tell a lie. That's a statement I learned on the seat of my pants as a kid. And that's what Solomon says. A false witness will not go unpunished. And he who tells lies will perish. Verse 10, luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a slave to rule over princesses. Money doesn't make you wise. And that seems to be what he's saying here in a different way. Luxury is not fitting for a fool. It just doesn't seem to go together. Money has not made him any wiser, any smarter, any more discerning, any more prudent, and much less for a slave to rule over princes. Give somebody power, and it doesn't necessarily make him a leader. He has to have those inward qualities of integrity to be a true prince. Verse 11. A man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook a transgression. It's it's sometimes a smart thing to not get quickly upset. I think Norman Hicks, he had a story, I think I had it right, where there was a guy who just, I've got a short temper, just don't get me upset. And he'd get upset really easy and get mad at people until somebody came into the shop that was a huge man. And all of a sudden, he found his temper. he found his temper and he stopped losing his anger. It says it's a man's discretion that makes him slow to anger. He realizes, I can get in trouble for being upset. And it's his glory to overlook a transgression. Maybe it's not that bad after all. Verse 12, the king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. King's roar, his wrath, is like a roaring lion. Lions have teeth. And that's why he's saying the government has a bite. The king has a bite, especially an Eastern monarch. He has a bite. And it is terrifying to be in the wrath of the king. And on the other hand, it's a blessing to be on his good side. His favor is like the dew on the grass. It is just so wonderful and it is just so abundant. Verse 13, a foolish son is destruction to his father, and the contentions of a wife are a constant dripping. Kind of wonder how these two things go together, a contentious son and a contentious wife. A foolish son and a contentious wife. The foolish son destroys his father. The contentious wife makes him wish he was destroyed, I guess. The things that can go wrong in a family. To have a son that's a fool, or having a wife who is contentious. She's like the constant dripping, like the Chinese water torture, just drip, 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 drip until it drives you crazy. Now then, there's the other side of it. Men look at it as nagging. Women often look at it, they're just trying to be helpful because we need all the help we can. But we have to be careful that we're not nagging and contentious because it is just so destructive. Verse 14, house and wealth are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Oh, what a great message. Fathers give you wealth, they can give you houses, but it is a prudent wife who's going to help you keep those things and grow those things. You might get this great gift from your father, but the best gift of all is from the Lord. He says there, the prudent wife is from the Lord. We're so blessed with good wives. I'm blessed with a prudent wife. The old saying, whether you get a nest egg or a goose egg depends on the chick you marry. And I think that's what Solomon is saying here. You can get all the wealth you want, but if you don't have a prudent wife, you might lose everything. I don't know if I've told this story. I probably have about Lynn's grandfather. Lynn's grandfather was the son of a wealthy man. Her great-grandfather was a stonemason who came from Ireland to build New York's Grand Central Station. He also built Grant's Tomb and a couple other big buildings there. He became a multimillionaire. He had a house in the city. He had a house in the country. He had a house on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. He had a lot of money. But when her grandfather was young, his mother died. And then his father remarried. And then the father died. And the stepmother took off with all the money. So Lynn's grandfather moved to California. And didn't see any of that money anymore. But isn't that something here? It's important that you have a prudent wife, I guess is the moral of the story. 15, laziness cast into a deep sleep, and an idle man will suffer hunger. Laziness. There are some people who just like to sleep. Yesterday was Memorial Day, and I was reminded of D-Day, and when the Allies landed on Normandy, the Germans were slow to respond. They might have been able to repel them except for one thing. They couldn't advance their men because they didn't have the orders from Hitler. And what was Hitler doing? He was sleeping. Hitler had a habit of sleeping. Schoolmates of his said he slept during classes. He slept a lot. He loved to sleep. That laziness ended up costing him and his country dearly. Good thing for us. He was a lazy guy. Verse 16, he who keeps the commandment keeps his soul, but he who is careless of conduct will die. Once again, that old statement, you're only hurting yourself. If you keep the commandments, you keep your soul. But if you're careless of your conduct, if you're foolish with your conduct, you might have some trouble. Obedience is so important. And I suppose this compares with verse 3. The foolishness of a man ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord. It's important to honor God and to keep his commandments and not to be careless of our conduct. Because the one who is careless with his conduct, who doesn't pay attention to his conduct, he could die because of that carelessness. Verse 17, one who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. If you lend money to a poor person, how is he going to pay you back? Well, he probably can, but Solomon says, you help a poor person, you help somebody else, and it's like lending to God. And God always pays his debts. And the old statement, you can't outgive God, that must come in here because it says here that God will repay the person for his good deed. It's good to be gracious to a poor person. We need to watch our attitudes towards the poor and be able to check ourselves when we begin to think in a derogatory way of the poor. He says, verse 18, discipline your son while there's hope, and do not desire his death. Well, there comes a time when it's just too late to discipline your child. They're already undisciplined, and there's no way to help them out. And that's what he's reminding us of. Discipline them while they're young. Start early. And this is a theme in the book of Proverbs, the disciplining of our children. Verse 19, a man of great anger will bear the penalty, for if you rescue him, you will only have to do it again. Well, we had that similar statement about the discretion of a guy who keeps him from getting angry. Well, here's the guy who doesn't have that discretion, and he gets angry, and he's going to bear the penalty. He's going to pay the penalty of that anger. And it tells you that if you bail him out, you're just going to have to bail him out over and over again. And we learn that with our kids. You bail your child out, he's not going to learn a lesson. You're just going to have to keep bailing him out over and over again. Verse 18, discipline your son while there's hope, and do not desire his death. Well, you can't just keep rescue them over and over. That's what he says. You rescue them, you just got to do it again. My dad was pretty lenient, but we had a lot of cars in our family, and so I drove at an early age. And the one thing my dad made it clear is you got to pay for your own tickets. And I knew he was serious about that. You're going to pay your own tickets. If you do the crime, you're going to pay the time. You're going to pay your own fees and your own fines. And so that's a good thing to remember. Just don't keep bailing somebody out, because they're not going to learn the lesson if you do. Verse 20, listen to counsel and accept discipline, that you may be wise the rest of your days. Pretty straightforward there. Listen to counsel. Those who know it all never learn, but the wise person, he does. Verse 21, many plans are in man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. We have this proverb over and over that man makes his own plans, but God has the outcome. My plans, whatever I decide to do, it can fail. God's ways never fail. And it also reminds us of what he said back in chapter 16, verses 2 and 3. All the ways of a man are clean in his own sight, but the Lord weighs the motives. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. And verse 9 of chapter 16. The mind of a man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And here, 1921, many plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. You might have a lot of plans, but you better make sure they align with God's plans. Verse 22, what is desirable in a man is his kindness. It is better to be poor than a liar. What is desirable to a man in a man is his kindness. What's worse than being poor? It's being a liar, he says. The liars have to have a good memory. This goes back to verse 1. It's better to be poor than a man. Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity. It might not be up to you whether you have money or not. But what is up to you is your character, is your integrity, is your desire for kindness and goodness in your life. And what is desirable in a man is his kindness. And it's better to be poor than a man who's a liar. Fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil. There's nothing that helps our sleep better than a good conscience. And that's pretty well what he says here. The fear of the Lord leads us to a good life, to make good decisions. We respect God. The beginning of knowledge is the fear of God, it says in chapter 1. And here, having a relationship with God. There's a sweet sleep for the righteous. Verse 24, the sluggard buries his hand in the dish, but he will not even bring it back to his mouth. Can you imagine this? The guy gets his spoon and he takes his porridge and he takes it up, but he's just so lazy. He can't even eat. That's pretty lazy. Sluggard, spoke about a lot here. Verse 25, strike a scoffer, and the naive will become shrewd. But reprove one who has understanding, and he will gain knowledge. That's a good, a scoffer. You correct a scoffer, and he's going to learn how not to get caught. That's what he says. And he will become shrewd. Reprove one his understanding, he's going to gain knowledge. When you take a look at the problem of crime, there was a time when they thought, well, the problem with crime is just a matter of education. We need to educate people, and if they're educated, then they won't do these crimes. But in the end, what we found out is we just had smarter criminals. People were still doing the crimes. They were just more shrewd about it. They were just doing things differently. Some people will never learn without being punished. And here he talks about a scoffer. He's just going to learn how to become shrewd, how to get away with it, how to do things differently. You reprove one who's understanding, though, he's going to gain knowledge. Verse 26. He who assaults his father and drives his mother away is a shameful and disgraceful son. This is almost an unbelievable proverb, that somebody would assault his own father, verbally or physically, and drive a wedge between himself and his mother. But I'm here to testify that I've seen it happen. And it says that it is the son who is shameful and disgraceful. People might say, oh, well, you don't know my parents. You don't know my father. You don't know my mother. You don't know how cruel they were. You don't know how unfair they were. You don't know how unjust they were. You don't know how stupid they were. You don't know how... Go on and on. But here he says, it is shameful and disgraceful to do this to your father and your mother. This is a theme that keeps coming up in Proverbs. Back in chapter 10, in verse 1, he says, a wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother. In chapter 15, verse 20, a wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother. Verse 17, verse 25. A foolish son is a grief to his father and bitterness to her who bore him. It is the shame and the disgrace is on the child, it says here. And it's a terrible thing to see. We see this, I think, in the New Testament in the story of the prodigal son. And what a terrible thing there that we see. And until he hit rock bottom, did he not come back to his father? It's a terrible thing. Verse 27, cease listening, my son, to discipline, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. Stop being disciplined, and you're not going to get smart. Look for the easy way. Look for the ways that only you want to do. Only listen to the message you want. And he says, get away from discipline. Don't discipline yourself. Get away from God's way, and you're going to stray from the words of knowledge. You're not going to get any smarter here. Verse 28, a rascally witness makes a mockery of justice, and the mouth of the wicked spreads injustice. A rascally witness. Hard to say. It makes a mockery of justice. The mouth of the wicked spreads iniquity. Again, this idea of injustice and telling lies and being a false witness. The mouth and justice go together, and justice demands that you tell the truth and not make a mockery of justice. Verse 29, judgments are prepared for scoffers and blows for the back of fools. You're just hurting yourself. That seems to be a constant theme in this chapter. Back in chapter 18, last time we looked at verse 6, a fool's lips bring strife and his mouth calls for blows. Beat me. And here, judgments are prepared for scoffers and blows for the back of fools. Wow. Was there anything there that stood out to you? Was there one proverb that maybe you say, well, that was really important? Maybe there was one that you forgot was even there, but now I remember now. You didn't even remember it was there. Or one that you'd forgotten and you're glad now to be reminded of? Or is there one there that was really important to you today? I hope that you've been blessed by looking at chapter 19. And may God bless us as we continue to pursue wisdom.